All right, welcome everybody to your second stimulus update on this beautiful July 28th day. I hope you guys are doing well, getting your week started. So I'm here to bring you some updates where I've compiled, read, researched a lot of information and putting it together for you, doing some quick comparisons so that you know what's going on and you can spend your time doing something else besides reading all these boring things that I love to read. So let's get right into it. So yesterday, the Republicans announced their HEALS Act. And what is the HEALS Act? So that's kind of their counter, or at least where they're going to start, versus the HEROES Act for the Democrats. So key differences, and I'm going to walk through them, so you can see them side by side, know kind of who's proposing what, and then we'll see where we come, hopefully somewhere in the middle. So the HEALS Act that the Republicans propose stands for the Health Economic Assistance, Liability Protection, and Schools. And we'll see some of those key points outlined as I go through it today. So, but first and most important of all, which a lot of you are probably looking forward to, is more of this. So it's been pretty much confirmed, this is $1,200 right here, is that each person that's eligible will be receiving that $1,200 just like we did before. There were some proposals, $2,000 a month till the end of the year, and all those things sounded great, but unfortunately it looks like they landed on doing the same as before. So it's going to be the same income limits as well, so $75,000, and it starts to phase out after that. So basically whatever you got before is what you're going to be getting this time around, with a few exceptions about children, and we'll talk about those, and dependents. So $1,200. So key differences between the two. Democrats are proposing, they had a $3 trillion bill that they proposed a couple of months ago. So it's been a while, right? The Republicans finally yesterday came out with their $1 trillion bill. So they're quite a ways apart. So a little bit, kind of discouraging. There's, on the Democrat side, they're saying the Republicans are stingy and, making all sorts of other comments and things like that. But what we need to understand is the Democrats have kind of asked for the moon and the sun, and, the Republicans are saying, no, we need to start way down here. So, they're negotiating, right? It's going to be somewhere in between. They're not going to walk away from this. We're not going to probably get the $3 trillion, and it's going to be higher than $1 trillion. So we'll come somewhere in between, and I'll keep you guys updated as things progress and we find out more, because there might be a series of acts that are proposed, so we might start smaller and then include some other things just so we can get some things done, right? Because we know that unemployment, for example, is ending at the end of this week. In just a few days, and then what happens after that. So there's a few key proposals for each in regards to that. So let's just talk about the $1,200. So $1,200, yay. We all get that, right? And then on the HEROES Act side, what they're doing is they're also doing $1,200 per eligible dependent, right? So how many kids do you have, right? Well, it's a maximum of 6 kids. A maximum of 3 kids, so 2 adults, 3 kids, so a maximum of $6,000. That's something like that. Whereas on the Republican side, with only $1 trillion to work with, they're a little more stingy. Instead of getting the $1,200, you're getting $500. So kind of what we did before. So, however, that includes all dependents, regardless of their age. However, in theirs, it didn't mention if it was limited to 3 kids, but that's kind of what's assumed at this point. So also other key differences with that. If you got left out last time because you didn't have a social, the Republicans are saying same thing this time around. If you don't have a social, you ain't getting something. Whereas the Democrats are saying if you have an ITIN, then you are eligible. So if we go the social route again, it's estimated that there's 15 million immigrant families that would miss out. So big key difference there as well. So let's move on to some other topics. So unemployment. So if you are on unemployment, you fear you might be in the future, something's changing, what's going to change? So the Democrats, they're saying extend the extra $600 through January. That's what it is. The Republicans are saying we're going to reduce that $600. I like to play with money. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to reduce it from 6, and we're going to reduce it to 200. So you'll get your state equivalent, whatever you're entitled to, and then you'll get $200. And then that kind of changes and phases out a bit so that by October, you will then be getting 70% of what your income was before. So could be more or less, you'd have to figure that out. 70% of what you were receiving before, with a maximum of 500 extra on top of your state, right? So if you're making 500 grand a year or something like that, don't think that you're going to get 70% of that, right? So it's whatever your state's provided, and then a maximum of $500 on top of that. So other key differences in the two. The Democrats, they want to extend the evictions, so that people aren't evicted, whereas the Republicans, there's no extension, right? That's ending. That's it. That's what you get. So there's a lot of videos you'll probably see out there about crisis is coming, the eviction stuff. Let's see what happens and what they say. So other differences, Democrats, in regards to coronavirus liability. So what about these nursing homes? What about these hospitals? What about these schools or things like that, right? No liability protection, They're of the mindset that these liability protections protect big business, right? Versus the Republicans, liability protection. They're going to make it difficult to sue unless there's gross negligence. So that'll be a liability shield for businesses, schools, hospitals, from facing claims over episodes, related to the coronavirus. State and local, so money for state and local. The Democrats are proposing $1 trillion for them to help with the decreased tourism and spending. So I'm from Utah, and I've recently seen some things being proposed, and people are talking, trying to get people out here in Utah to get outside, and we have a lot of outside stuff. So I was thinking, the tourism industry is doing pretty well, but I recently went on a vacation, and I was surprised to see all of these places shut down, that normally help with all those tourists and lodging them and feeding them and things like that. So the Republican side, state and local, they left out, any additional funds for them. However, there is talks about some flexibility from funds that were left over from the prior stimulus. So there's a good chunk of money there, and so they'd have some flexibility on how to use those funds. Another key difference is school funding. So in the Democrat Act, there's nothing. However, remember that this bill was done a couple of months ago, and that they have recently said that they'd set aside some funds for that. So it was done a while ago, and different concerns and things like that pop up. So on the Republican side, they're proposing some conditions based on opening of the schools, right, of $105 billion set aside for that. So I hope that was helpful to you guys, to bring you some of that information, side by side. You can see what's going on. With unemployment, if you're on that, they're not saying it's $600 or bust. Pelosi was quoted as saying that, right? They know that, Democrats are asking, like I said, for the moon and the stars and the sun or whatever, and the Republicans are starting down here because they know they're both going to give and take, and it'll be somewhere in between. So what that ends up being, what unemployment ends up being, not sure. What we know $1,200 per person, how much it's going to be per child, we're not quite sure, but more of that to come. So with the Republicans having launched the HILS Act yesterday on July 27th, they now have until August 7th when Congress goes for another recess to try to get something done. So there'll be lots of updates coming, lots of progress, lots of arguments and name calling and things like that. So stay tuned, and I will bring it to you guys in a concrete, simple way. In under 10 minutes is my goal, and we're there with this one, so that you know what's going on and don't have to spend your mornings, evenings, afternoons reading all of this gibberish. So thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you tomorrow.